once again, good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our session on maximizing the impact of your recruitment efforts. Tips from a 30-year veteran in hospitality recruitment. A shout out again to our Facebook audience joining us live as well. This webinar is part of a 6-part series on workforce-related topics supported by Gordon Food Service. Gordon Food Service is a great partner of WRA's with valuable business solutions for you to consider. This webinar is hosted by the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, dedicated to the success of the food service and hospitality industry. WRA serves as your primary resource for regulatory guidance, training opportunities, and solutions to relevant challenges. A couple of housekeeping items before I turn things over to our speaker. Feel free to submit questions using the chat box found at the bottom of your screen or the Q&A feature, whichever you prefer. The webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to you in the next couple of days. If you would please answer the quick feedback questions after the session, it would be greatly appreciated. I will now introduce our presenter, and thank you so much for being here and making this session possible. We are fortunate to have with us today Matt Martin, Corporate Director of Talent Acquisition at Marcus Corporation. A little bit more about Matt. With over 30 years in the field of human resources and talent acquisition, Matt has focused on the sourcing and selection of individuals passionate about service and caring for others. He has done this by partnering with local high schools, workforce development centers, community-based organizations, technical colleges, traditional and non-traditional universities, and international student sponsors and educators. Matt, I will go ahead and turn this session over to you.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, everybody. It's really an honor and a thrill to be here speaking and presenting to all of you today. Before I get too far into it, I just did want to reiterate my appreciation for Wisconsin Restaurant Association for having me today and doing all that they do to support our industry, and for our sponsors, Gordon Foods. I've partnered with them on several different occasions, from our workforce development programs to partnering with ProStart, to the competitions. They are just such great partners, and obviously there's a business part of what they do and reason they do what they do, but their passion for supporting the needs of our industry long term and thinking about what we need to do to create or help develop the future of our industry via students and educational institutions and things like that is just phenomenal. So anyway, as Amy said, my name is Matt Martin. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition for Marcus Hotels and Resorts. I have been employed by Marcus Hotels and Resorts for 19 years now. It was actually 19 years on the 13th of August, and have loved every year, every month of my work with Marcus. I've stayed with them so long because their values and my values and the strength of the culture, it's just something I really appreciate. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Marcus Hotels and Resorts, because on Marcus Hotels, we don't put the name Marcus Hotels up there. You probably know them as the Grand Geneva Resort and Spa, the Pfister Hotel, the Hilton in Madison, the Hilton Milwaukee, the St. Kate Art Hotel, AC Hotel Chicago, all these different names you may know them by. So we don't necessarily flag them a Marcus Hotel. We're part of Marcus Corporation, which has two main divisions, Marcus Theaters, which has been around since 1935 when we opened our first movie theater in Ripon, Wisconsin, and is today the fourth largest theater circuit in the US. Marcus Hotels and Resorts currently has 19 hotels, acquiring our most recent management contract in Coralville, Iowa, just last week. And with that, that put us in 9 states. So we talked a little bit about Marcus Theaters, which actually includes other brands like Movie Tavern, Marcus Bistroplex, and those of you familiar with Marcus Theaters, which being the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, I assume most of you go to a Marcus Theater somewhere near you when you go to theaters. You probably understand that we do a lot more with food and beverage in our theaters than many of our competitors. Most of them are like restaurants, and they have bars. You may also be familiar with the Superheroes pizza concept that we have in a couple of our locations. And those of you that have been in the industry for years are probably somewhat at least familiar with Safe House, the wonderful spy-themed destination in Milwaukee, Wisconsin that's been around for over 50 years. Marcus acquired that brand and that location 3 or 4 years ago. And today we actually have a Safe House in Milwaukee and a Safe House in Chicago. And it's a brand we hope to continue to develop. So that's enough about who I work for and who I really love working for. But just a little bit about me. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri originally. I spent my formative years in a place called Ferguson, Missouri, not Ferguson, Wisconsin, Ferguson, Missouri. A place I never thought would be very famous until it made the news several years ago for, I guess, reasons we don't want to make the news. But that's where I spent my formative years. Like many teenagers, when it came time to get out and get a job, and at least back in those days, that's what your parents said. Hey, you're 15, 16 years old. You're old enough to get out and get a job. So get out and get a job. My job was working as a lifeguard. Then later on, I turned that into supervising and managing pool operations throughout the St. Louis area. Known for our heat and humidity, pools are very popular here. And we operated some 500 locations throughout the city and the county here in the St. Louis area. That had me recruiting and hiring lifeguards later on in my career with this particular organization while I went to college. And that's where I started recruiting individuals and hiring individuals. Many of these pool locations, especially the city locations, community locations, had concession stands. So that was my first experience trying to recruit and hire people in the food and beverage area. After that, after college, I worked for a company named Adams Mark Hotels. Many of you may not be familiar with them, but they were medium-sized hotel group, owned all of their assets. I started at their corporate office in St. Louis, and then I was forced in January of 1 year to take a promotion and move to Clearwater Beach, Florida, to be the HR director there. Then I moved to Daytona Beach, then back to St. Louis at the Adams Mark in St. Louis. And I spent a good portion of time with them. But that's really where I first started working in heavy recruiting in our industry, from restaurants to other hospitality professionals. And I joined Marcus, as I said, 19 years ago. That last image in the bottom right-hand corner is of the Hotel Phillips in Kansas City, Missouri, where I started my career. So that's enough about me, though. We're here to talk about something that is very important to all of us, and it's probably what keeps us all up at night right now. At least it does me, or keeps us all very sleepless, right? Expecting to get that call in the morning that, hey, there's nobody here to unlock the door. There's nobody here to open your operation, or people calling and saying, hey, we're trying to go to dinner at your establishment and the doors are locked. I see that all the time right now. It just seems to be an epidemic. My hope, our hope, Amy and I hope, is that by the end of this webinar, you've maybe picked up 1 or 2 tips, or have a chance to review after this presentation the information we're going to provide that might help you in some way make some key hires. And wow, in today's market, every hire is a key hire. So I'm not going to beat you over the head with this information, right? You live it every day. You've probably heard other presentations from Wisconsin Restaurant Association and other groups about how hard it is and why it's so hard, and just the sheer statistics involved with hiring people right now and what the labor pool looks like. But I just thought I'd share a couple screens here. The first one is, well, it's kind of the Bible, the holy grail of recruiting statistics. If you don't kind of follow the jobs report from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, you probably should, right? It comes out on a monthly basis. It lets you know how we're growing, where we're growing, why we're growing, if we're growing. And it also gives you an idea, an index of how we're competing and what we're doing compared to other industries. So this is the slide that I share with individuals in our organization the most, and probably the most important. It just month over month across all the years gives you an idea of what's going on in our industry. We fall, food and beverage, hotels, all fall within the leisure and hospitality sector. So you look at the graph, we were clipping along, always doing great, always a top employer until February 2020. And then we all know what happened then. But a great resurgence right now, but that great resurgence we're seeing right now, towards the end of that graph is one of the reasons it's so hard for us to find people right now and why it's so competitive. Here's another slide that I think really kind of sums it up nice. This is last month from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. And these are the number of jobs added, right? Net change. We had 380,000. The government had 240,000. They had not been growing at quite that clip previously. And then you look at everybody else, 60,000, 48,000, 11,000. That's across the entire country. I think it's, I don't know, something like 170 million people in the US, 160 million people in the US work, right, are in the labor pool. So that's significant. Actually, even further, if you're kind of a labor statistics nerd like me and you pay attention to this stuff, over the last 6 months, leisure and hospitality has reported 6-figure job gains each month, often accounting for 40% of the total net job change. In April, the total gains reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the US workforce was 266,000 jobs. Leisure and hospitality had reported 331 jobs. I don't even know how to do that percentage, right? What is that, 130%? So what had basically happened in that particular month is these other sectors lost tons of jobs. So we accounted for all the gains. April was a tough month for many sectors. And the funny thing is, or maybe not so funny thing, is often the food and beverage industry is noted as a footnote in these situations. Well, they'll often say much of that or most of that growth was in the food and beverage industry. It really is what's been driving the growth over the last 6 months. So solutions and tactics. For us, when we ran into this issue, we started with where, which seems like a weird place to start. Often in recruiting, I tell folks that they need to start with why. But we started with where, and that was, where are our top sources of candidates coming from? Where are our hires coming from? Where are our candidates coming from? Where are our hires coming from? What are our top sources for both, right? This is something we can track through our applicant tracking system. Some of it's self-reporting by the candidates, some of it's tracking specifically where these candidates are coming from. Tokens are dropped by different sites, so it can actually track back to where they're coming from off the web. Or, again, self-reporting might be a walk-in or a job fair. So we looked at where they were coming from. I sat down with our chief commercial officer and we talked about our career site and all these other things that we might need to enhance. And he looked at me and he said, Matt, where do most of your candidates come from? And I didn't even have to look, right? I look at this report monthly, if not weekly, right? To make sure we have a healthy pipeline of candidates. And I said, oh, Andrew, that's easy. We get 10 times more candidates from Indeed than we do any other source. It is the 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to hourly recruitment for us. He said, well, that's where you should focus. If you can increase by percentage one source, increase the source that provides you with the most candidates. So that's what we focused on. We asked ourselves, what if we could increase our return from Indeed by 33%? We asked, what changes would we need to make to our approach to make this happen? What additional resources would we need to tap into? How would we execute our plan changes and enhancements? So part of what we did was really focused on training. We have in most of our hotel properties, we have HR directors or HR managers out there. that are tasked with recruiting and filling positions at their hotels. Some of these folks are also tasked in filling positions with our restaurants, be it Safe House, Miller Time Pub, Mason Street, the Chop House Grill, any of the restaurants and operations and catering operations within our hotels. So we started with some training. One of the things we focused on, obviously, was training for Indeed. And one of the key points to always make with Indeed, and it's right here on the screen, is when you search, when you open the Indeed page, it defaults to relevance, not date. Now it's going to look, when you look at the screen, you're going to be like, well, most of these jobs are pretty current. Well, yeah, date's part of the factor, but number one is relevance. So if you type in server, it's giving you the jobs within their system that most closely match that information that you typed into their search, be it location, be it the title, be it duties and responsibilities of a job. It's going to go through that job posting and look for that. So always remember, Indeed starts with relevance. You can switch it to date to search by, but most candidates don't bother doing that, right? They just go in, open it up, put in a keyword. It serves up hundreds and hundreds of jobs. Why would they do anything else, right? So also keep in mind that if you have an applicant tracking system or some way of sharing your jobs with the World Wide Web, right, on the internet, it Indeed will automatically index those. Well, those organically indexed jobs, that's what we call it. When it goes out there and it scrapes it and pulls it in, that's an organic post. Those things will age quickly, drop to the bottom of the page. If you don't manage it, if you don't sponsor it, you're going to lose that posting pretty quick. And we'll talk a little bit more about best position later on. If you want to use Indeed, Indeed Apply, it sounds repetitious, sorry, very popular, which is a one-click process or just a few clicks to apply for a job, which is a great way to get candidates to let them apply with their profile. Do not drive them to another site where they have to take a lot of time creating another profile. You'll need to sponsor the job or find another way of listing it on the site. And then lastly, we communicated and taught that direct sponsored postings offer options organic postings do not, like how you share the pay information, where it is, how visible it is, how it comes up on previews. However, some of these sponsored jobs or direct posts do require a little more time. Obviously, you do have to take action and you do have to manage it if you're going to get the best return. But if it's your greatest source, it's worth the time and the effort. So we're going to go through a little bit more about Indeed here, quite a bit about Indeed. Many of you say, gosh, or may say, gosh, I wonder if Matt works for Indeed. I do not work for Indeed, right? I do not own any Indeed stock, or Recruit, I think is the name of the company based out of Japan, who actually owns Indeed. They actually own Glassdoor too. If just a little side note, if you're wanting to know. No, I have just always been passionate about using whatever is the best tool to get the job done. So if I need to put a nail in the wall, I don't reach for a screwdriver. I reach for a darn hammer, right? And that's kind of what Indeed is in our world, and yours too, right? If you want to compete with everyone else, including Marcus, this seems to be the best venue to do it. So this particular slide, again, is from our training. It talks about enabling Indeed Apply. This is actually a screen from the system that you would utilize to do that. We actually highlighted the title there. One of the things we're going to talk about briefly later is pay attention to what you're saying in titles, make sure they're relevant. We found ourselves for years using the term steward, right? It's kind of a hotel term for dishwashers primarily. They do other work, but dishwashers, kitchen cleaners, we would call them steward. And then after several years, we realized that nobody else did, right? Everybody else called them dishwashers. So we had to do that. So pay attention to your titles. Pay attention to how you list your titles. If you put a bunch of ancillary information before the title, you'll probably lose relevance when people search for that title. And then just a little warning here that we provided to our team members is that if you do use Indeed Apply, often it will make the organic post that may come through your applicant tracking system or another source. It may make that go away. So if you decide to unsponsor it, you may need to go back and then repost that position to get it back out there organically. If you have some sort of, in our field, we talk about an evergreen post. It's one of those things, right? We're always going to need dishwashers. We're always going to need servers. So we keep this one out there always, right? We really kind of never take it down. We just maybe just add openings to it, or you just leave it on your website all the time. So this information is something that we pulled from Indeed Hiring Insights. We'll talk about that briefly here in a bit. But basically, Indeed will provide you the information. What are the top search terms that people look for jobs in an area or for a position in a market? So the people that applied to housekeeping jobs in Madison, Milwaukee, Lake Geneva, these are the terms that they used most frequently, top 10 terms, when they clicked and applied for one of those positions. Then you use those terms. You make sure you're using the right title. You make sure you use these terms in your job postings. Some terms you might not be able to use. Day pay, daily pay has become so popular, and we're going to jump back to this. I don't see it showing up, weekly pay showing up, but you'll see day pay or daily pay showing up a lot in searches nowadays. So people are going in and searching. I'm looking for a job that pays me daily. And then they figure out what are those jobs they're interested in, right? But we didn't list it here because we don't offer daily pay. We can't list it, would be lying. But we took many of the other key terms and then wove them in to this job posting. And then by doing that, it's going to show up as a relevant search for all these terms, right? Nursing home cleaners, right? Well, how do you work that in, right? You're not a nursing home, but it's what people are searching for. So past experience is a hotel, hospital, healthcare, nursing home cleaner, or custodian. These are all key search terms that people apply for housekeeping jobs through. You can do the same thing for server, dishwasher, cook, busser, host, bartender. Another key point is think and act like an applicant. We're going to talk at the end about, the next step you should take after this webinar. But if you haven't applied for a job in some time for your own organization and see what the process looks like, you're probably hurting yourself, right? Your GM should be out there always acting like they are an applicant and looking what they see and where they're showing up, right? So what we're seeing here are two previews. The one on the left is the preview that you would get off of a PC. And the one on the right is the mobile preview you get for jobs on Indeed. So if you're searching through the Indeed app or through a browser on a smartphone or something else that provides a mobile presentation and a mobile experience, maybe a tablet of some sort, that's what you get on the right. What you get on the left is what you get if you're on a PC, a little more information. This is where most people are going to make the decision whether or not to apply for your job. They're going to read that preview. Does it say what they want? Oh, it pays what I want. It pays more than I want. It's located where I want. I can apply with my Indeed resume. I don't have to do a lot of work, right? I can, one click, I can apply for this job. People want the easiest, fastest, most simple way nowadays. So I talk about post local, make sure you're competing with your local competition, see what other people are doing, and think mobile. Because for us, 70% of our applicants come through a mobile experience, either through Indeed or through our own career site. And then the last point here for this page is I hate talking about algorithms because usually when I hear people talking about it, I'm thinking, oh yeah, they just don't have another explanation for something. It seems the great cop out for what the hell is happening to my career site or a website. But it is how things work. They Indeed uses kind of an algorithm to kind of pick the key pieces of your job posting to create these previews. Now, mobile, straight and simple. This is what you get on the right pretty much every time. But on the left, if you're trying to change the experience they get in a PC preview, you'll have to really work with it for a while because it may not pick up the key terms and pieces. And that's where we come up with our rule that less really is more. If you want them to use key pieces of the posting, write a shorter post. Nobody's reading the 2-page job description for a dishwasher, right? Or server. Most of the folks you want know what a dishwasher or a server or a cook does. So they're not reading line, bullet point 42, right, of what they're going to be doing with their job. Don't do that. So what do we find out? Number one, we needed to be on page 1 or 2. That was our rule, right? Not only was that a rule, we hired a sourcing specialist to come in and help us with it. All this wonderful young lady who's also a student to the HR program at Marquette does. Well, that's not all she does, but one of the things she does is every Monday she goes out and she looks and makes sure that we're on the page 1 or 2 for all of our key postings out there throughout the division. Being on page 1 or 2, you are in the top 30 companies on a preview on a computer, and mobile, you're in the top 50. And the reason we want to be page 1 or 2 at the least, how many jobs does a server, housekeeper, cook, busser, how many jobs do they have to apply to before they get a job in today's world? Probably 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. The other part I'd really point to and key aspect for you is you got to think of applicants like you would if somebody called your restaurant and says, I'm interested in hosting a party somewhere and I'd like you to cater it, or I'd like to buy out your restaurant or whatever your facility is, your bar. And I am willing to pay you way more money than I should for this. The longer you took to call that person back, the more likely it is that they find another venue. Same thing for candidates. The longer you wait to reach out to them and the less you engage them, the more likely they are to find another job. Bullet point number 2, we needed to use Indeed Apply, one-click application via a person's Indeed profile. So they create a profile. They may have a resume, they may not. They create a profile. With one click, they can apply. We started engaging people in Indeed and then driving them to our careers page rather than trying to use Indeed to make them then go to our career page, create another profile. Even if they can use their Indeed, LinkedIn profile, resume, if they get there and they see boxes, even buttons that they have to click, they're much more likely to just move on and find a job that they can apply to with one click in Indeed. We need to share pay rates. We need to make sure those pay rates are competitive. You may be hesitant to do that, but if in your market, a vast majority of the other employers are sharing rates, our belief is that candidates assume that your rates are not as good as those. If you're not sharing them, if you're not saying I'm competitive in this market, they assume you're not. And or if they're making less than you do pay, they don't know that, right? Until they speak to somebody and maybe even get a job offer. Again, we talked about it earlier. We had to ensure that titles and descriptions were relevant and avoid using special symbols or terms and phrases in titles that were not titles. Sometimes Indeed will say, hey, this doesn't look like a title. What are you doing? You'd have people want to put exclamation points on each side of the title, right? Dress it up, make it look pretty, right? Use some emojis in there in their job descriptions or something like that. And we just cleaned that up. We do still use some signing bonuses or feature some of that after the title based on property's preference. We don't usually see it messing up the relevance on a sponsored job. I would tell you there's a higher likelihood, that's the term I'm looking for, that would mess up your relevance for our organic post, right? So just be very careful with those. So I alluded a few times to these Indeed hiring insights, and you may have saw some of that information. You thought, how do I go get me some of that, right? Well, it's real simple. You reach out to Indeed. They'll set you up with a rep. They'll be happy to run an Indeed hiring insight report for you. Now, I would tell you, these folks are pretty busy, right? The folks, imagine that, the people running the world's largest job board during a hiring crisis, a shortage, staffing shortage. Imagine that, they're really, really busy for some reason. So this is, I thought I'd share one with you. This was from May. It was cook jobs in Milwaukee. I assume I thought some of you might have operations in that area, or at least be familiar with the area. And what this tells you, short and sweet, is, hey, guess what? It's really competitive to hire cooks in Milwaukee. And of course, you're thinking right now, well, Matt, I didn't need a report to tell me that. I haven't had a cook apply in 2 weeks. But this really gives you the numbers, right? Number of jobs posted, number of people that apply for jobs like that in your area. Is that moving up? Is that moving down? Which may be more detail than you want. I usually just look at this and say, okay, we're in a 98 out of 100 highly competitive market. For those of you with operations in Lake Geneva, I think Lake Geneva is a 99, if not a 100 for competitive market for cooks. But at least it gives you, and this is all based, Indeed has, I don't know, terabytes. I forget what the large term is. They have so much data based on user activity, right? This is where most people go to apply for jobs. So they can watch those habits and use that activity to help us better understand what we need to motivate people to apply. So that's the top of the page. I couldn't get it all to fit in one place without having it be too small for you to read. This is the middle of the page. Again, your account rep or somebody Indeed will be happy to send this to you. And guess what? It tells you the average salary in your market. And it's pretty damn accurate, right? You may not base all your pay comp decisions based on this, but at least you have some idea if you're at least competitive. If you're paying $10 an hour for a cook, and the market's paying $12.74, might be part of your reason or your issues finding a cook. It tells you how people apply. And then you get down to really some of the key items here. Top search terms by click. That was on that other slide I shared with you where I showed you Madison, Milwaukee, Lake Geneva, all the terms that people use. These are the top terms that when somebody ended up applying to be a cook, these are the top 10 terms. Now, sometimes it's something, well, cook, well, yeah, who would have thought, right? Food service, that might be in your job description or your posting, it might not, but these are the terms then that we would work back and try to include in our job posting. Obviously, we wouldn't include Chick-fil-A though. That might be, we might include it and say, well, if you worked at Chick-fil-A, we might be your place. But you see that from time to time, and that's usually based on folks doing a really good job of recruiting via other avenues, right? Be it radio, TV, billboards, that people are actually going and looking for a job at their company and then applying for one of these jobs. And then it tells you the top employers by click. These are the folks that more people are applying to than anywhere else. Well, what can you do with that? Well, go look at their postings. Why is everybody applying there, right? Is it a higher rate? Is it one-click apply? Do they have better postings? Often they're shorter, they're cleaner, but you can actually learn a little bit about candidate behavior by going and looking at who's getting the most clicks. In the bottom of the page shares most common employers on candidate profiles that are applying for these jobs in Indeed. So you'll see this sometimes. You're like, hey, we made the list. Actually, that means that a very large portion, or in your market, might be a smaller market, so it may not be a ton of people, but more of your people are applying for jobs than, they're in the top 10. You're in the top 10. Then most common locations we'll try to use a little bit for some just better understanding of geo positioning and where some of our pockets of talent, places we can look for more help. So the other great thing with Indeed that you can use is you can use their messaging to communicate with candidates, right? All of us have had issues calling people, right? Nobody picks up the phone anymore. If it's a number they don't notice, everybody sends you straight to voicemail. Even people applying for jobs, right? You would think, well, certainly they're going to pick up the phone. No, and for line level hourly positions, we found they didn't call us back, they didn't email us back, they didn't text us back. We did find, though, that when we used some of the messaging through Indeed, they actually responded. What'll work is how it works is if they have the Indeed app, or they've set up a profile on Indeed, it will send them push notifications you've seen the ads, right? Where, guys, I think tucking his daughter in and then, she says, I don't want to move out of town, Dad. And then, bing, Indeed pops up to save the day, and there's a job right down the street from their home, obviously, right? Same process works, right? They're sending these push notifications to individuals. Use the messaging to communicate, engage, and drive candidates to apply and interview with you. And this is just, we found candidates respond for us at a higher rate than email, phone, and text. Again, that's for hourly positions within our operations. Obviously, salaried position, management positions, we get a little bit different. We get a little more phone, we get more phone calls back or emails back and things like that. So there's another tool in Indeed. Again, just a disclaimer, I don't work for Indeed, but we've used Indeed Resume as well. And we found it to be successful. I won't spend a lot of time here, but it's a handy tool, and it allows you to actually search people within their system or candidates within their system that have set up profiles. There is a cost for it, but it's not too high. Also, you can run your own Indeed hiring insights if you get a professional Indeed resume account. And the way it works is you get so many contacts a month. You also, if you send an email, a message to a candidate through the resumes, Indeed resumes, and they respond, if they say yes, you get that credit plus an additional credit back, right? They give you more, right? Because they want to drive positive activity. If the candidate said, Amy said, no, Matt, I'm not really interested, you still get that credit back. The only time you use up any credits, and we found sometimes it's hard to use up the credits, the only time you use a credit is when the candidate doesn't respond at all. So if you're crafting strong messages, you'll find that you'll hold on to a lot of these credits as people either reach out to say they are interested or even they're not interested. I always point out to our team to make sure they're using Indeed hiring insights. We talked about the locations to figure out where they're searching. And this is what comes up for Lake Geneva, which is really interesting. Where do folks come who work in that particular area? Because it's a little bit more of a destination resort area. Then one more piece on Indeed resume. They've got different ways you can search, different tools you can use. You can even set it up to where when there's new resumes that come in or somebody updates their resume, that Indeed will inform you, hey, Matt, these 8 people in the last week have updated their resumes or added resumes. So you can go in and make sure you send all of them a message. Hey, you want to cook? I need a cook, right? They do offer some free contacts, not a ton, but some for veterans, people, leaving military service, right? Looking for opportunities. And then they've got a multitude of search criteria, including one that a person marks their resume or their profile as I'm ready to work basically now. You may ask, what does all this cost? Well, I would ask you, what does it cost to close your operation for whole shifts or days? What does poor or inconsistent service cost you? And interesting enough, the cost of Indeed resources is based on market competition and budget, right? You can set your budget, but then sometimes you have to manage that budget to make sure that you're competitive in the market. So it may not be as costly as you think, and they really do try to cater for individuals who are operating small businesses and individual owners. A lot of people may think, I'm not big enough to use Indeed. Indeed goes out of their way to try to work with small businesses. They even offer some better pricing for small businesses. So, the question might be, well, Matt, what did you find to be, or what do you guys find to be the second best source for candidates or hires? And this really comes under hires, right? It's not the second best source for candidates, but it is consistently our best source, our second best source for hires. And I bet it's probably yours too. It's consistent for most businesses and industries. It's associate referrals. Referrals also tend to perform better, often stay longer. A top reason people stay or leave are the people they work with, right? I'm sure you see that all the time. I often tell folks in our hotels and our restaurants, turnover is very difficult for many reasons. And one of the reasons that it's bad is when one person leaves, often other people leave because they left, especially if they're a top performer or somebody they liked working with. There's lots of surveys and studies that show that people want to work with people they like. People all want to have a quote friend at work. So the referral process, is stronger based on those components. Number of referrals are based on scale, right? So the Grand Geneva employs, 800, 900 people. They're going to get more referrals than a restaurant that employs 20 people, but the restaurant only needs to hire 2 people, 3, 4 people to make a difference. The Grand Geneva needs to hire 150 people to make a difference. So it's all scalable, right? So if you focus on it, make sure you're offering, I recommend a referral bonus of some sort. We have also found that last bullet point there is if we tie a referral bonus on with the signing bonus, which so many of us are offering right now. You see them everywhere all the time, $1,000 sign-on bonus if you stay 90 days. I think Amazon's offering a $3,000 sign-on bonus right now. I don't know if that's all their positions or other positions, but I do know I've seen that information. But if you tie a referral bonus and sign-on bonus together, right? The referrer, they don't get your bonus if you don't stay for a while, and the person coming in who's been referred, right, doesn't get the bonus if they don't stay for a while. When we do that, we find that people end up staying long enough to get the sign-on bonus, because I'm sure you've all scratched your head that you offer $1,000 sign-on bonus and people still don't want to stay 90 days to get $1,000. Other solutions and tactics. Every step needs to be easy, quick, and engaging. At any point in time, it's not easy, it's not quick, and it's not engaging. They're gone, right? You can actually look at your steps in the process, look where people drop off. It's often upload this, attach this, tell us why you left where you were at. They're gone. And when they move on, they go apply somewhere else, they have no problems finding a job. Mobile site and process must work every step. One bad link, one bad page, or a simple box they can't click here to continue, and they can't. You will lose large numbers of your applicants, if not all of them. And you've got to make sure these processes work all the time. They stay, the systems are working. There are no issues. That's another thing that our sourcing specialist helps with. She'll go out and she'll try our applications, try the applications of our competitors, figure out how we can build, for lack of better terms, a better mousetrap. Stay connected to your community. It's still a great resource for applicants. We work with Employ Milwaukee, UMOS, Goodwill, Lutheran Social Services, Grand Avenue Club, Heart Love Place. We work with everywhere we can, and sometimes we may only hire 1 or 2 people from that organization in a year, but it's worth it. Often these are folks that will stay long-term. They're looking for a career plan. Some of them have been attending, Employ Milwaukee assists with a culinary training program. So those coming out of that training program tend to have a little bit more interest in staying in culinary roles. Continue to partner with your tech colleges, Wisconsin Restaurants Association's ProStart. If we ever needed to be paying attention to the future talent, the future leaders of our industry, now we need to do it more than ever. Work with local high schools that may have other programs. Continue to work with the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. If you're not posting the jobs on the Job Center of Wisconsin, you're doing yourself a disservice, as people on September 6th fall off of unemployment and they have to figure out what else to do, and they're required to go apply for jobs. Many of them will be applying for jobs through Job Center of Wisconsin. It's a website easy to search for. If you have an applicant tracking system, ATS, utilize other paid resources that offer distribution of job postings. We use Circa, and what they do is they'll take our job postings and then distribute them out to other sites. These are sites for individuals that may have different challenges. These are sites that allow us to connect more strongly with the minority community, military groups. Really a great way just to make sure that you're doing the right thing from recruitment, but you're able to kind of broadcast your postings. Continue to try to convert customers, their friends, family, and children of team members to jobs. And that's a large part of why you have your signs in your windows, right? And then we're going to be sharing, I think Amy's going to send out a post webinar email. There's a couple other tools here that we shared with our hiring managers, our HR team members. One was a document, a report that Indeed partnered with OpenTable to create, specific to the restaurant industry, on how to staff during a historic labor crisis. And then the other one includes some of the top 10 tips. Some I've shared here, some I've not. So I think if you both are easy reads, neither is very long, real simple to go through, but you might find some information there for you or somebody else on your team who's doing the postings. And everybody's favorite slide to see in a presentation, right? In conclusion, right? So in conclusion, the competition for food and beverage industry talent has truly never been more intense. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time and not a young guy, right? I remember the 70s, late 70s, when my brother, who's 5 years older, he was trying to find a job, and he's out applying for dishwasher jobs. And there's guys my age there who had other jobs, who didn't have them anymore, who are applying to be dishwashers to help pay their bills, right? You just don't see that anymore. We take that all the way up to this cycle. I've never seen it more competitive. And if you buy me a cup of coffee someday, I'll be happy to share with you all the reasons, systemic and non-systemic, society-based and not society-based, that's brought us to this. But I would tell you, outside of a major economic slump in the US, it will likely never get any easier. So you got to get smarter. And then last, your first step after this webinar should be, before you go do anything else, right? Unless you have people waiting to get in, or if you go bus tables or serve tables or cook, or all three for some of you. But your first step otherwise should be navigate to Indeed, search for your most critical job openings. If you can't find them, you have a problem. If they're buried deeper than page 4 or 5, you have a problem. If you try to apply on your smartphone and it doesn't work, you have a problem. If you can't apply in less than a minute or 2 max, you probably have a problem. It's just that competitive. And I often tell folks who are stressed out about how competitive it is right now to find talent, I often tell them there is no silver bullet. There's no easy, simple solution. The good news is, the bad news is there's not enough people to fill all the roles. The good news is, while you can't outrun this problem, you can probably outrun your competition if you work smart and you work hard and you flip every switch and turn on every tool and make sure you're being responsive and engaging and you're acting differently and better with candidates than they are. So with that, I say thank you. I've enjoyed speaking with all of you today, or I guess speaking to all of you today. I will turn it back over to Amy. I don't know if there's a chance for people to, through the chat or some other function to ask any questions. I'll be happy to answer any if there are.